I'd like to invite Mr. Suresh Shah, the former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and CEO and director of Lion Brewery Ceylon PLC and the chairman of Ceylon Tobacco PLC, to give us an overview on Sri Lanka's trade policy and market access. Please welcome Mr. Suresh Shah.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in, and welcome to this session on trade policy and market access. Sri Lanka, as you know, is a small island nation, and thanks to its proximity to one of the world's busiest sea routes, the East-West Sea Route, Sri Lanka has always been a trading nation. Trade in ancient times has involved mostly luxury goods. The product basket was wide, it was varied. We imported silks, horses, perfumes, glass, wine, coral, and ceramics, whilst exports were gems, pearls, iron, elephants, rice, ginger, honey, beryl, amethyst, gold, silver, tortoise, and so on. Trading partners were as wide and varied and included, amongst others, India, China, the Mediterranean countries, Persia, and Africa. The bulk of trade may have been in transshipment and re-export, and it is said that the ports of the island were jammed with ships from India, Persia, and Ethiopia. Coming to the current times, as the rest of the world, Sri Lanka is also dealing with a pandemic, in addition to which we are also dealing with some legacy issues that have been with us for quite some time on the economic front. For example, we've had high debt to deal with, recurring fiscal and trade deficits, and low reserves. And therefore, the options that have been available to us in dealing with this pandemic have been rather limited. And so, we've had to make do with some short-term measures to ensure stability and survival until a rational economic policy can be put in place. Now, a trade policy doesn't stand on its own, but must be based on an overall economic policy. In this context, 5 points are worth highlighting. Firstly, the country aims to reduce its dependence on debt. The strategies used, amongst others, will include promoting investment within the country, particularly FDI, and raising export revenues. Reducing import expenditure will also be a priority. Secondly, the reduction of the trade deficit. Focus here will be on promoting domestic resources-based exports, higher value-added exports, and import substitution where sustainable. I think this is an important point. Import substitution usually works only when it is sustainable, and Sri Lanka needs to be mindful of that. Thirdly, zero import tariffs on machinery and technical equipment to develop internationally competitive industries. Fourthly, to reduce import taxes on raw materials and intermediate goods to promote domestic production. And 5, food security. The pandemic has highlighted the need for food security more than at any other time and will invariably lead to business opportunities, not just within Sri Lanka, but also in markets overseas. As a small island nation, our foreign policy must also support our trade ambitions. Sri Lanka's foreign policy is fundamentally non-aligned, and as a small island nation, we must be, and we are, friends to all. Of course, being a part of Asia, we have strong relationships with Asian countries. Traditionally, our strongest relationships in Asia have been with India, with China, Japan, and Singapore. Our longest and closest association is, of course, with India, with whom we share extremely close historical and cultural ties. China has been a close friend as well, having come to our assistance in recent times. Going forward, however, we aim to strengthen our relationships with emerging Southeast Asian nations such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. As you know, the Indian Ocean is now a hotbed of geopolitical activity. Sri Lanka will work closely with India, SAARC, and the BIMSTEC nations to ensure regional security. And whilst from a trade perspective, we are positioning ourselves as a gateway to Asia, we will continue to enhance the country's historically strong ties with the developed world. As you will see shortly, the developed world is an important trade partner for Sri Lanka. Moving on to specific measures that support trade, the focus here is on deregulation, ease of doing business, and trade facilitation. In terms of strategies, a deregulation commission has been appointed to improve competitiveness through domestic policy reform. The commission brings together experts and practitioners from both the public and private sectors. Its co-chairs are the senior advisor to the president, representing the public sector, and the chairman of one of Sri Lanka's largest conglomerates, representing the private sector. Harmonize industrial policy and trade policy. This is currently ongoing. Implement the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which Sri Lanka has ratified. This too is ongoing. Trade arrangements to improve market access. This will help Sri Lanka-based businesses to build export markets for goods and to import technology and input materials. Moving on to some of the trade agreements that Sri Lanka currently has, we have 4 with Pakistan, India, and Singapore, which are bilateral agreements. And we also have a trade agreement with the SAARC nations, that's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Afghanistan, Maldives, and Bhutan. Moving forward, Sri Lanka aims or proposes 2 trade agreements with China and with Thailand. Once the China FTA is completed, together with the Indian FTA, Sri Lankan exporters will have access to a market of 2.9 billion people, roughly 39% of the world's population. In terms of the Sri Lanka-India FTA, there is a substantial export trade taking place through this FTA with a 65% utilization for Sri Lankan exports. That's for every 100 products that's exported, 65% goes through the FTA. Similarly, with Pakistan, the export utilization is around 79%. The Singapore FTA was a landmark agreement for Sri Lanka. It's the first with a powerful and sophisticated trading partner. Singapore has an extensive network of 21 FTAs with 32 trading partners, and this sends a very positive message on Sri Lanka to the international business community. It is a comprehensive FTA and focuses on investment and trade in services in addition to goods. Other areas covered includes economic cooperation, e-commerce, telecommunication, intellectual property rights, customs procedures and trade facilitation, transparency provisions, trade remedies, dispute settlement, and government procurement. The Singapore Trade Agreement could very well be the standard followed by Sri Lanka when entering into future agreements. If we move on to other trade arrangements that Sri Lanka has access to US, Japan, UK, and the European Union through GSP schemes. GSP, as you know, provides important market access opportunities for Sri Lankan businesses without reciprocal tariff liberalization within Sri Lanka, which would be a feature of a normal bilateral FTA. The EU and the UK GSP schemes are a step beyond. It's a GSP Plus scheme. The utilization of the EU GSP Plus is approximately 50% due to rules of origin criteria. However, efforts are underway to address this through the extended accumulation facility that is permitted under this scheme. Now, some important trade statistics which might be of interest. On the Sri Lankan export performance, as you can see, the United States accounts for almost 25% of our exports. The United Kingdom accounts for about 9%, India about 6%. A few other countries who take up a fair share. And in total, about just under 66% of our exports are to 10 destinations. The European Union, including the UK in 2020, accounted for 31.6% of our exports. Two important points here. One is the numbers to China. Just $225 million of exports to China. Very small in terms of the Chinese market. But since an FTA is under negotiation with China, I think this is a market which has a lot of opportunity for Sri Lanka. A while ago, I spoke of the importance of the developed world for Sri Lankan exports. And you can see the data here. Approximately 58% of our exports are to the West. In terms of imports, China is our leading trade partner, with India a close second. Approximately 26% of our imports come from countries with whom we have free trade agreements. Once the China and Thailand FTAs are finalized, 50% of our imports will be covered by FTAs. And this insulates a business based in Sri Lanka from changes to local tariff policies if their imports originate from any of these countries. A few more statistics on Sri Lanka's import performance. This is all 2020 data. And the important thing here is that unlike in the case of exports, we don't seem to be importing much from the West, with the exception of the United States. The opportunities for trade, particularly regional trade from Sri Lanka, are many. For instance, Sri Lanka's existing trade agreements, together with the proposed China FTA, will give Sri Lanka-based companies access to well over 40% of the world's population. The question now remains, is the Sri Lankan business environment conducive for investment? This is, of course, the topic of this entire conference, not just for this session. But permit me to answer, and the answer is yes. Let me give you a few reasons why. We have a highly educated workforce, a strong rule of law, and a strong commitment to democratic systems of government. Our location gives easy access to busy air and sea routes and is in very close proximity to India. Low rates of tax, which have been consistently applied, 14% on export profits and 14% on dividends. A very professional and well-regulated financial services sector. Our accounting standards are based on IFRS. Sri Lanka is a signatory to major intellectual property agreements, including the Paris Convention. And finally, the quality of life for an expat in Sri Lanka is without doubt the best in South Asia. So, in conclusion, yes, we do have some short-term challenges to be faced. We are ambitious. We want to drive our growth to 6% and beyond in the medium and the long term. Growth that is both equitable and sustainable. Our trade policy will play a crucial role in realizing these ambitions. Sri Lanka has always been a trading nation from the ancient times, and that will be something that continues in the years ahead. The country is positioning itself as the gateway to Asia, The foundations are being laid. The opportunity is now. Be a part of it. Thank you. Stay safe. Take care. Thank you.